back again to speak to us about failed sanitation and how it can kill you. I do have some handouts, so I'll walk around and give them to you while you're in your seats, and we will turn the time over to Jim.
Well, welcome again. It's a pleasure to be here, share some ideas with you. And you're my neighbors. That's part of the reason I'm here. I think that's why you're here, is because we are neighbors. We have an interest in each other. The sheet that you're going to get right now, there's actually 3 of them, but the one I'm talking about, it'll say Sanitation 4001 on it. It looks like this, and there's a place for you to fill in a few things. Although I've actually cheated and I have the answers there for you, but we'll just start there and get going. What I call this is a hidden disaster. It's something that's right in front of us, but we don't recognize it, we don't see it. And you have to understand that failed sanitation will catch, sicken, maim, and kill more people than the event itself over a long period of time. And self-reliance is what we're really talking about here, and that's what will give you hope for the future. Well, there's some laws, and I just put us in the same place when we start here. So real quickly, some laws. I call them the laws of well-being and success. And the first one of those is the law of provident living. And this is the foundation for everything else, the law of provident living. There's 4 parts to it in order of priority. And this is how everything actually works. Number 1 on the list is spiritual. S is for spiritual. That's the foundation for everything. You need that to be in place. Next, the one that will make the difference between whether you live or die is attitude. If you lose your attitude, you lose your life when things get really, really bad, because you just can't keep going. How do you change your attitude? Well, it's really a spiritual foundation, but number 3 on this list, K, is for knowledge. And when you have an understanding about how and why things work, your attitude about things changes. You can say something like, well, I don't want to do this, it's not going to be fun, but I know what to do, so I will be okay. However you want to look at it, but your outlook is what will get you through. And the bottom of the list is where everybody wants to start, and that is stuff, the material things. But it has to be in the order of spiritual, attitude, knowledge, and then stuff, because if you get the other 3 things right, you'll end up with the right things at the right time in the right order. You won't get out of order with those things. Sometimes people worry about, well, I need to keep electricity on because, I need power. Great, they don't take care of food and water, so now you have the lights on so you can watch yourself starve and die of disease, but at least you can see what's going on. You've got to get things in the right order. There's a thing I call the law of stewardship, and that's why I'm here. I think it's a stewardship. I think that's why you're here, is stewardship. There's 3 parts to the law of stewardship. It's very simple. The first one is authority. The authority is a simple one because you accepted the authority to be alive, therefore you have the right to act. So your authority is to act. Number 2 on that list is the responsibility to act properly. And I think, who else needs a handout? Anybody else here need a handout? Put your hands up so we can get those to you. Thank you. That'll give you a place where you can keep these little notes, if you will. So you have authority, responsibility to act, and then number 3 in this law of stewardship is the accountability. You will get the results of what you do or don't do, what you say or don't say. So that's an important thing. I also have another one that kind of fits with that. I call it the law of the parachute. We all know what a parachute looks like, kind of what it'll do, right? If you jump out of a plane without a parachute when you're at altitude, what's going to happen? You're going to die, and you can't fix the problem. So here's the law of the parachute. Number 1, you have to have the parachute before you need it. Number 2, you have to have it with you when you need it. You have to actually know how to use it. You have to actually use it, and it better be a good one. There's 5 points, and if you can't answer yes to all 5 of those when you fall out of the plane, you simply die. Now, we're not talking about parachutes and jumping out of planes exactly, but we're talking about your attitude, your knowledge, your skills, the supplies and things that you have. You have to have them before you need them, and they have to be right, those same 5 points. Now, everything that you need to know, do, and have for every day of your life is in what I call the 9 core modules. They're modules because they fit together, and they kind of, everything works together inside of them, but they also fit together. There's 9 of them. This isn't for emergencies. This is for every day of your life. And the list of them is there. I'm going to go down it real quickly so that we get on with other things. So number 1 is foundation. This is about the principles and laws about how and why things work. Number 2 is clothing. That's what I'll talk about next, is clothing. Then we have water, which is the liquid of life. Then there's sanitation, which we're into in just a moment. Nutrition, which is about what you eat, drink, and a whole bunch of other things to deal with that. You have shelter, It's nice to come inside. There's all kinds of different things you can use for shelter. Then there's wellness, which covers a whole bunch of things, from first aid and medications to herbs and those types of things, as well as personal protection. And then you have tools and supplies. Those 9 areas, everything you need to know, do, and have. Now, sanitation, as I described, is a hidden deadly disaster right in front of us, but we don't see it. Most of us recognize some sanitation issues a little bit, but we don't know what to do about them. Something I've been studying for years. So failed sanitation is going to get you in big trouble. You can do everything else right, but if you're dying of cholera, what's the point of having food or water or clothing? You've got to stay well, and it's all about sanitation is what it comes down to. Now, most of the credit for this huge improvement that we've had in our lifestyle and our longevity is given to things like hospitals, medications, and those things. They're wonderful, and they've saved a lot of lives, but the real credit goes to improved sanitation. And that's what it's really all about. I'll give you some statistics here in just a moment that'll help you understand that. And where sanitation is poor, death and disease run rampant. We usually think about those poor countries over there, those emerging countries, or those third world countries, or where the disasters are, and we talk about those poor people. What I'd like you to understand is you could be there in a heartbeat. Within just a few hours, we could be there. So here's a few statistics to consider. Now, we're talking about in the U.S. right now. We're not talking about over there. We're just talking about something in the past. Understand that in 1952, there was a polio emergency. And that was because there were 14 cases per 100,000 people. Not fatalities, but cases. That was an emergency, and we got all involved in that. That was a sanitation issue, was how we spread polio. Now, if you take a look back in the year 1900, in the early 1900s, this is the death rate from babies from dysentery only. Each year, per 100,000 births, there were 4,429 deaths, and that was accepted as normal. Almost 5% of the live births died from dysentery, and we just accepted that as being okay. Now, what I want you to understand is those deaths from diarrhea are 100% sanitation caused and preventable. Now, we started learning about that because if you take a look at a graph that looks at the U.S. and England and Scotland and a few other places, and you see the death rate from all cases, cholera and different things, for infants was very, very high. We were running in the vicinity per 100,000, that you were running about 6,000 or 7,000 deaths in the 1900s. But as we started learning about the sanitation issues and it began to improve, by 1920, that death rate had fallen to around 20. So we went from thousands to 20 and 30, and it's continued to go down through the years to where it's very, very small. Also, if you take a look at the typhoid, this is just looking at one city, Philadelphia. And up until about 1900, they were just simply taking the water out of the rivers around there and just using it, and typhoid was a problem. And you had thousands and thousands of people die per year from typhoid. And once again, when they learned about that and then put in water filtration and treatment plants, the death rate from typhoid dropped down to just a few cases per year. It's all about sanitation. That's what's critically important to understand. Now, let me give you something a little more recent. This is Haiti. Haiti's a great case study in this. I do not make light of that tremendous earthquake that occurred down there, and it caused tremendous destruction and loss of life. But the sanitation issue that has continued since then is quite striking. Here's some, now this is of 2012, so as of December 2012, the hospitalizations were running at 2,300 per week. This is from cholera alone, not all the other diseases, and that resulted in 40 deaths per week, and that's where you're getting hospitalization care. By 2014, there have been 734,134 confirmed cholera cases, resulting in 9,372 deaths. Now, that death rate doesn't seem really high, although if you're the one that dies, it's pretty high. So, but we can think in terms of, well, it's not all that high, but consider this. Right now, it's estimated that the subclinical, that means people that are carrying cholera, but they're not sick, because they haven't become weakened enough, that there's about 2.5 million people that are carrying cholera around in the gut. What this means is we don't get rid of that in a hurry. We're talking generations to clean things up down there. The other statistic that's very interesting, as of 2012, there had been $13.5 billion in aid poured into Haiti. And that's needed. It was desperately needed down there. Now then, understand this, what if that aid had not been possible? What if the world had not been able to come to their aid? You need to understand that the death rate, the mortality rate of cholera untreated is about 60%. So we have a very low death rate from cholera because we're getting treatment. Now, how does that apply to us? What if we get into a situation where aid is not coming soon enough for you? You've got to not come down with disease. The way to avoid becoming dead from one of these things is don't catch it. So it's a sanitation. Now, gratefully in the U.S., we've had very little experience with sanitation breakdown. We have little areas where that occurred, like, New Orleans area and Katrina. That was a sanitation breakdown there, but it was very, very confined to that area, and a lot of aid came in. We haven't dealt with massive sanitation breakdown like occurred in Haiti. So the responsibility is yours and mine is what it comes down to. Now, sanitation, there's two key areas when we talk about sanitation that you have to look at. You have to be 100% sure that you're capable of keeping your environment, everything around you touches you or you consume, clean. And then you have to have ample amounts of safe water for consumption. That comes from storing water and then the ability to make it safe. I call those the twin sisters of disasters. Sanitation and water go hand in hand because most of our disease is spread through water. So why is water such a critical part of this problem? Well, let's ask a simple question. What's the leading cause of death on planet Earth right now? What do more people die from than anything else other than old age? That gets all of us. It's dysentery. More people die from dysentery than anything else. Where does it come from? Contaminated water, unsanitary water. That is the issue. Now, gratefully in the U.S., we haven't had to deal with massive outbreaks of cholera, dysentery, or anything else for many, many generations. However, that could change. So having ample amounts of sanitary water is critically important for you because it's vital for your health and well-being that you do that. Again, that's the twin sisters. Now, contaminated water isn't just about discomfort. If you have dysentery, diarrhea, cholera, yes, it's very unpleasant for you, but what it does is it takes you out of the ability to work. You can't care for other people. They have to spend their time caring for you, so it puts stress on the whole household or the whole community. You want to avoid that, and of course, babies and older people are more susceptible to those diseases. And the thing I would like you to understand about water purification, this is another area I've spent a lot of time both researching and developing things, is that the preparedness industry, you're not getting the whole story about sanitizing water. It's not hard, but it is more complicated, more complex than just buying one device. And I will simply tell you this, there is not one device that you can buy that can take truly filthy water and make it clean. It's going to take stages, between 6 to 9 stages. Now, let me describe to you filthy water. Utah Lake with raw sewage flowing into it and bodies floating in it, and that's all you've got, that equivalent of water. That's nasty water, that's bad water. You can't just grab that up, dump one chemical in there, run it through one filter, or just boil it or something like that and make it safe by doing one thing. It takes a series of things. You need to learn about those things. Now, during disasters, what happens is people break down. What we're talking about is the physical stress that's going on, the emotional stress, the lack of proper rest, the poor and inadequate nutrition, and the fact that you have an environment that now may be highly contaminated, and the immune system is simply overloaded and it collapses. It can't handle all of that. So the goal is to stop the rampant spread of things like cholera, typhoid, dysentery, and a whole long list of these nasty little things. So when things really break down, it will be up to you and I to take care of things. The guys on the horses with the flag and the bugle, they may be on the way, but they may not get to you in time. They may be in the same trouble that you're in, so you can't count on rescue. You have to take responsibility yourself. I'd like you to understand one other thing. I talked about Haiti for just a moment. I want to talk about them and us, a little contrast here. Now, Haiti is a very poor country. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. I've never visited there, but I know people who have, both before the earthquake, during and after. It's a very poor part of the world, and the devastation was tremendous. But if we would have that level of devastation here, I want you to know the people of Haiti were better prepared than we are. Now, why would that be? Now, physically, they're not better prepared, but they had a lifestyle that was what? This high off of ground zero, very, very, just barely getting by. How far did they have to fall emotionally, psychologically, physically? Not very far. Where do we live in comparison? We're in the stratosphere. It's a huge fall. And if you're not prepared mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and physically to deal with that, people simply give up. And so it really comes down to first attitude, and then secondly, we're just not prepared as a society to deal with the breakdown in water, sewage delivery, electricity, loss of transportation, communication, all those kinds of things. So let me give you a strategy. This is a very short class. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to give you a strategy to start thinking about these things. I do longer classes, and you can sign up for those. We teach them. They're free. And we also have things that are published. There's a 4-hour DVD set, so you can learn more. But let me give you the strategies that's in all of these things right here. Your first defense is to first off strengthen your immune system. In other words, get healthy. Do everything you can to be as healthy as you possibly can, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. That's number one. You do that now. You don't wait until, oh my heck, I see the disease coming and gee whiz, I need to get into shape and do these things and I better stop and all those things. So you do those things now. Your second defense is that you must be able to then, in the midst of a disaster, maintain your own health and wellness. You learn the alternatives, you understand some things that will help you when you're under a lot of stress. The third part of the strategy that we'll be talking about is you have to be ready to care for your own sanitation needs. You've got to keep your environment clean, and that includes water and everything, so you don't pick something up. If you have a strong immune system, you're less likely to get sick on the first bug that comes by, but you can only handle so many of them. So I'm going to start with what we'd consider to be the worst of the sanitation issues first. There's a whole bunch of them to talk about. But the worst one we're going to talk about, and it's actually something that's the most deadly substance on planet Earth. It's more deadly than anything else because of how it kills people. And it's something that you and I have control over, and that's human waste. That's the big problem that we have. Now, one of the challenges that we have when we talk about human waste is it's a dirty topic. We don't want to talk about it. We're these clean, sophisticated people. Maybe when we drink out of our little cups, we have our pinkies out or whatever it is. We don't discuss these things because it's all taken care of in the background. There's dirty jobs that are being done by other people. We just go in and haul it out to the corner of the street and it goes away. Flip the lever, it disappears, shove it down the sink, and it all goes away. We don't think about it. We don't have to talk about it. But what I'd like you to understand is you've got to get over it and deal with it. Now, I understand how that works. Let me ask you a question. Now, since this is not TV, you may respond and I will see it. In the past 3 years, how many of you people have sat down with your family or your friends or whoever it is, the group that you're with, and said, and this can be at a family night, it can be around the dinner table, where it is, and say, tonight, folks, our discussion is going to be poop. Let me see your hands. Okay, we have one weirdo. Oh, no, I mean, okay, now, I understand this because I have 9 children. The first 6 of them were boys. I know what potty mouth is. I know it's hard to talk about this stuff and try to have a sane conversation, but you've got to figure out a way to deal with it, to deal in these areas and come to a conclusion of what you do, because if you don't and you just wander into the problem, then things happen is what it comes down to. So anyway, these human waste issue we're going to talk about, I'm going to go from the least hazardous to the most hazardous of things that we consider to be waste. Top of this list, which is not hazardous at all, is urine. Urine is actually a resource. Now, that has a yuck factor to it for most people because we live in this society where we do what we do. But I want you to understand, when things get really, really bad, you might want to understand what to do with urine rather than throw it away. Now, I threatened for years to do a class on urine, and I thought, I don't know if I can do that one because that's just kind of over the top for most people. So we finally sent out the notice, we're going to do a class on urine, I'll do it again. And I thought, maybe nobody will show up, just the real weirdos will show up, right? This wackos are going to come to this one. Well, we had this class, and our auditorium, our classroom, every seat was taken and people were standing around the walls. So I figured, there's a lot of weird people out there, this is good, I'm not the only one. But you think about it like this, you're going to this meeting, your neighbor sees you leaving and says, where are you going tonight, Bob? I'm going to a class. What's the class on? Urine? Probably never talk to you again, okay? I say this with some humor because I'd like you to understand there's some things that are very important that you should learn. Urine is not a waste. It is not dangerous. It is actually a resource, and there's many, many uses for it that you may want to consider when things get really, really bad. And yes, you'll have to get over your mindset and the yuck factor. I'll give you one of these. It is the earliest known, and it works very effectively as a tooth whitener. It's not hazardous. I'm telling you that. Okay, anyway. Yes, it is. Okay, now then, for your safety, what it comes down to, one of your strategies is that you have to have a way of dealing with these things. That's the strategy. So when the system is disrupted around you, you must take responsibility. You have to take actions immediately. You can't wait and say, well, let's see if everything comes back to normal in 2 weeks. You're going to know it's not. You have to take responsibility now, and you have to be in a position to help each other. Now, right now, you're helping others by educating them. You're getting educated. You're helping educate other people, and I recognize that most of the people in your neighborhood are not here learning, right? It is your job to learn, because right now, some of them don't want to learn, but when things happen, they're going to be motivated. And you need to be there to teach them, because if you don't, it's going to be a problem for you. This is one of those things that you can't look and say, well, okay, I'll just let them do their own things over there and die of disease. You have to understand, if they're dying of disease and they're within 5 miles of you, you're at risk. People can starve to death, and they can freeze to death, and they can do all those things on their own. It may not affect you, but when disease comes into the picture, this stuff spreads. It's extremely important that you get involved. Now, when things break down, what people normally think of is things like, well, it's the outhouse, the pit latrine. Grandma and Grandpa had one on the farm. Probably everybody here has either used one or seen one, right? That is Haiti, folks. That's what they did in Haiti. That spreads disease. The reason we don't do that, and if you go back and take a look at the sanitation issues that were causing disease a long time ago, what do we have? Outhouses? Well, it's the flies and the mosquitoes that get down there, crawl on things. They come out, they crawl on your lunch and your baby's face. What do you think that does? It's open to the atmosphere. That's a problem. You can't do that. Some people say, well, I have an RV with a holding tank. Great, now you have a 50-gallon holding tank. You're going to fill it up with all this really yucky, nasty stuff. What the heck are you going to do with that stuff? It's designed to go to a dump station. Now, if things are broken down, there is no dump station, your vehicles don't run, you can't haul anything, you know what people are going to do? And those that can drive, they're going to drive down a little road over here someplace in the middle of the night. They're going to look around, see if anybody's looking. They're going to pull that dump valve out there and spread it out. That's called Haiti. Everything we saw go on in Haiti is going to happen there. You have the chemical toilets and the porta potties, you know, the blue water things. Great, now you pickle the stuff. What the heck are you going to do with it after you pickle it? We're not trying to preserve it. And then, of course, you have the bushes. Now, if you have a very, dispersed population, I've used a lot of bushes in the wilderness, in the winter and the summer deserts and things. You can get away with that if you do things carefully and handle things properly. But if we're all trying to use the bush, and what I'm talking about is the bush here, there's no flush toilets, there's no water, and you got to go right now, and your house is falling down on a pile of rubble, and you just go out there and use the rubble. Or think about this, all the people that went to the Superdome, Katrina, there's a real case study, and people going there who weren't prepared, they showed up there. And all right, they knew to go to the bathrooms. He went into the restroom, and there he used it till the bowl is full, and it's running on the floor. Then it was in the trash cans, it was in the sink, it was in the corner. Then it was out under the hall, in the hallways, offices, under the bleachers out there. We had people get sick and die from disease because they were trapped in this place, and they didn't have an alternative. They didn't know what to do. By the way, there's another message in that. One of the reasons you want to be prepared is you don't want to go to the rescue center where there's 5,000 other really unhappy people that have no clue, because that's a great place to get sick, is what it comes down to. Okay, so you have to have options in place right now. Now, if you live out in the country and you have a septic system, and as long as you have some water to flush it with, you can keep doing that. If you live in the city, your options are pretty slim when the flush toilets don't work. One of them you can consider is using a dry composting toilet. Those can be installed and can be used. They have them both that sit on the floor and those that go between the upstairs and the downstairs. You might look into those things. It's not terribly expensive, but you're going to have a couple of $1,000s or more into them, depending on the size of those units. That's worthy of looking into. Then there's another manual method that you may want to use for a short period of time. I call it the Deuteronomy 23:13 method. It's manual. I'll get to that one in a moment. But one of the things you've got to do is you've got to decide early on what's going on. Now, one of the things that you'll see around, and I have them, and our company puts them together, and it's the bucket, bag, and toilet, and the seat, and those things, and some of the sanitation supplies. First off, if you consider the people who are running to the Superdome or any kind of a center like that, if everybody took one of these with them, it'd make a whole lot of difference in both lifestyle and survivability. So this is a worthwhile thing to have, particularly if you're going to be going someplace. You've got to decide early what's happening, because it's like, okay, the water's off and there's been an earthquake and the toilet still sits here. Maybe it's going to come back tomorrow. You probably know that it won't. Don't keep using the toilet and fill it up till that it's full to the top. What the heck are you going to do with the stuff in there? you've got to make a decision early on, and that's where this can be a useful thing to have temporarily, the bucket with the bag in it. Now, by the way, you don't have to have a seat. The seat just keeps the ring from being too deep on your hiney, that's all. You need the bucket, you need the bag would be the best. If you don't have a bag, you can use the bucket, but now you got to clean and sanitize the bucket, so the bags help on that. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment as we have time. But this is something that you may want to have so that immediately you can switch to using this for a short period of time while you get something else going on in place. Here are the key concepts or the principles about human waste to consider. One of them is this. Number one, you keep the urine separate from the fecal matter. I already made the point that the urine is a resource. It's not something that's nasty. It has many, many uses, because once you put the urine in with the fecal matter, you have to treat it all like it is the solid waste, which is where all the disease stuff is. So you're going to keep them separate because you can handle them and dispose of them differently. So urine goes someplace else. And there's strategies for learning how to do that, do it safely. The second part of this key concept is that, number one, you have a safe, long-term method of disposing of the solid waste. If you're collecting it in a bucket like this or someplace else, you've got to have a place that you're going to take it and dispose of it properly. Now, let's get to the Deuteronomy 23:13 for a second. You can look this one up. I'll quote it for you. You see, the master engineer who created this place knew what the heck he was doing. And when he was talking to the children of Israel when they were in the wilderness in this period of time, he told them what they had to do because he didn't want them to get sick. This is what he said, Deuteronomy 23:13, "And thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be, when thou shalt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back and cover that which cometh from thee." The message is this: the soil, the life in the soil, the worms, the nematodes, the fungus, the bacteria, all these things in there, they were designed to break down the waste and the disease-causing mechanisms in them and make it safe over a period of time. Now, it may be a couple of 3 years. It needs to be in the soil, it needs to be covered up and not exposed, because the soil will denature it and make it safe. So your job is to have a safe way of handling it and then getting it out there so it's in the soil. And oh, by the way, you're going to think right now, we're just about out of time, you're going to think in terms of, well, I've got it in a bucket, I can take the bag out and drop it in the hole and bury it, right? Don't do that. You're breaking the rule. What did the rule say? Cover that which cometh from thee in the soil. Now, the Lord didn't say, don't drop the plastic bag in there, because they didn't have plastic bags. So you have to understand, he didn't give that instruction because he didn't need to give them that instruction. So I need to give you the instruction is you don't put a twist tie on the bag and drop it in the hole, because the contents needs to be in contact with the soil, because it's the soil and the life in the soil that will take care of it. So in this case, you take the bag, you tip it up and dump the contents out. You do not want that bag back. You know, you're not going to do anything with that bag. It just goes open down in there, and you're going to be able to cover it. Now, there's a whole strategy in that I can teach you at another time, or come by the booth and we'll talk about that. But you've got to handle these things properly. So there are things that you can learn to do to take care of yourself in an emergency. Now, a few other things that go into this strategy. These are things that are all contained within some of the DVDs and the classes I do. Register for the classes. I teach them down at Thanksgiving Point. They'll be there regularly where you'll be able to go. Things like this, you got to protect your home, because if you're connected on a sewer system and you have a basement, you are at threat for raw sewage coming into your house under certain conditions. Well, if you turn your basement into a cesspool, you can't live there anymore. And all the things that are in your house, you have to abandon. So you've got to stop that from occurring. There's strategies to do that. Another thing is, of course, learning about and having cleaners and sanitizers so you can keep things cleaned up. You've got to have some of the tools for keeping things cleaned up, you know, buckets, washcloths, mops, and those things that are non-electric. Talking about grid down things. Personal hygiene, there's one you've got to take care of. How do you keep you clean, your clothing, and those things? And oh, there's one of them that's really important that you need to have a strategy on, and that is, you know, everybody stores some toilet paper, right? What do you do when you have nothing but the empty tube left? I have some people say, well, if I couldn't have toilet paper, I'd rather die. Well, you can do that, but that's the wrong attitude. Toilet paper's only been around for 115 years, 120 years, and most of the world doesn't use it anyway. You need to understand what you can do about those things. Personal protection, that's gloves and mosquito protection, things like that, pest and vermin control. So those are things that you need to understand, and you can learn all of those things that you need to learn, but it's going to take a little bit of study. It's going to take a little bit of time. Like I say, the one class that I do, it's now been filmed, and it's 4 hours long. And then that doesn't include the class on urine, that's another 2 hours, and that doesn't include the one on others. So there's a number of hours of things you need to learn. Now, one last little thing that I'll put in here, and no, I'm going to save that to the end of the next one because we'll just kind of roll into this next one real quick, and I'll try to give a way of summing this whole thing up that will work for you to understand what you do. Because one of the challenges that people have is they say, like, there's too much here to learn. It looks like it's too much. It's not if you understand how to do it and how to associate properly. One last little thing, since I brought it up here, you see a lot of people that have the wash buckets, and this is how you do your laundry. You know, you have a thing like this that has the plunger on it. What I discovered, because I don't talk about or sell something I don't do or use. So you get the bucket, and I'm going like this. This is hard because this is a weak motion this way. You don't have a lot of strength when you're doing that. So the next thing I did on my bucket was I took and I said, well, I've got one of these handles around, so I put this on it. This is better because I get more of this motion in there. This is much better than this is. But it's like, that's still too hard because you want to wash a pair of blue jeans in a bucket. Try that. It's a lot of work, but you may have to do that. So this is the answer. Because now you got the whole body in this thing, and what it is, it doesn't take as much work if you can hit that water in there hard and jam it through the fabric and those things. And when you do it this way, this is like the bicycle pump. You got your legs, your whole body in it, gravity working with you. I can smack that thing hard and not wear myself out. And it only takes about 4, 5, or 6 pumps, and I'm done. Whereas if you're doing like this, you're doing this for a half hour in there and your arm falls off. Well, you don't have to go to the gym, so it's good for that. Just to give you some strategies and ideas there about some things. Okay, we're going to change gears for a moment.
You need to get set up, or are you good?
I'm good.
Okay.
We'll just go.
I have new handouts. I'll start passing.
Okay, do that. Now we're talking about the cold weather and winter.
One last thing.
Yes.
Urine.
Yes.
Make it safe.
It is safe.
It has all sorts of toxins in it. If you want to get rid of, just use a water straw.
You can do that, but mostly what you're going to do with urine is it's full of nitrogen. Uric acid, urea, is a very powerful, that's what you go down to the fertilizer store and you buy urea out there, and then you put it in your garden. So what you're going to end up doing is you can use that. And by the way, one last little thing on that, if you will use that urine on your tomatoes, the tomatoes love it. It's a great foliar feed if you'll dilute it about half and half. But here's the real important thing about that. If you'll tell your neighbors what you're doing, they don't want any of your tomatoes, you get to eat all of them. And they're bigger and juicier. And there's been lots of studies done on these things and how this works, and that urine can be used to very successfully grow a lot of things. Okay.
I'm just going to announce it so people who want to come over.
Okay.
Okay, Jim Phillips is now going to speak to us about foam clothing. So if anyone is interested out there and wants to come sit down, and I have some handouts I will hand out while he is speaking about foam clothing and keeping warm during the winter.
Could you go down to our booth and there's that black top there. Would you bring that to me? Just that black, yeah, just the black one there. Okay. Now then, cold weather and winter. Sanitation is one of the black holes of preparedness. Because you get close to that one, it sucks you in and it's just over with. It's kind of like getting close to a black hole out in space once you get to the event horizon. One of the other black holes is cold weather and winter. And we have to be practical about this. We think in terms of, well, it's cold and we have this need to stay warm. I want to stay warm. And you're being incorrectly taught by people who are well-meaning. They don't mean to teach you incorrectly, but you're being taught something that you cannot do as being the answer. It will not work about how you stay warm. What will not work is backup heat. When we all are without electricity, natural gas, or these other things we normally have, and we're all trying to heat our homes, it will not work. Let's don't try to do something that won't work. Now let me explain to you why I say that. First off, we've had a little smoke in the air around here because of the winter, right? Or because the fires have been going on, okay? And that's been kind of rasty, and we know what happens in the inversions around here. Suppose we had on the Wasatch Front, and each one of the domiciles actually had a wood burning stove and a coal burning stove in there. So now we have 500,000 plus wood burning appliances in there. They're all burning wood. What's the air going to be like? The healthy people will die. How long will the wood last? One season. And we've stripped our mountains up there. How big of a pile of wood does it take for you to maintain your lifestyle that you have right now, which is basically I set the thermostat on the wall at 72, 68, whatever it is, and heats my whole house. How big is the pile of wood to do that for 2 years? 2 years. It's the same size as your house, folks. That's a big pile of wood. And people say, yeah, but the pioneers, they heated with wood. Yes, they did. First off, there was a few thousand of them. Next, they had a house that was probably smaller than your kitchen, and they didn't heat it all the time. They heated it when they were cooking. Lifestyle was different. So if you were trying to maintain your lifestyle by saying, I'm just going to have wood-burning stoves and coal or propane or whatever you want, you can't do it. Now, there's an individual that I know, fairly well-off individual. He took me on a tour of his house. He lives here in Orem, kind of up on the bench. Nice house. House is probably $1.5 million for the house itself. It's not one of the giant mansions, but it's a, you know, it's a nice big house. And then he showed me all of the preparedness things he's put in there. He has a 2,000-gallon propane tank buried in the front yard. He has stand-down generator, backup heat, all these things, solar panels. I would estimate, just looking at it, that the addition onto his house, he put in another $250,000 and all these preparedness kinds of things. Gee, I wish I had those things. It'd be nice. Most of us don't. But here's what's significant about that is, he said, I can maintain my lifestyle and my comfort for 2 years without any input from the outside world. That's really neat. Now, I asked a couple of questions. My first question was, as we were talking there, I said, okay, so what are you going to do for year 3 and 4? He didn't say anything. He just kind of looked at me weird, like couldn't imagine that something could go longer than 2 years. Okay, think about it another way. And I said, now how many people in your neighborhood have done that? I mean, this is an upscale neighborhood. I said, how many people are at your level of preparedness? He says, nobody. He says, I'm the only one. Great, it's January, you know, the power's off, the gas isn't working, those things, and you have light and heat in your house. How's that going to go over with your neighbors? What are you going to do when they show up? Shoot them? Now, some people, that's their attitude. You come to my house, I'm going to shoot you. I call that the Rambo syndrome. You know, shoot them when they get on the front lawn, you'll let the bodies pile up, and that'll keep them away. You know, have a pile of bodies out there. So what I want you to understand is that we need to be doing some things that are both practical, that's doable. Yes, he's put enough money into it to do it, but when he runs out of propane, now what? He doesn't have a plan. Most of us can't put that amount of money into our preparedness. Now, there's a few people that may live in a location where they're already heating by wood, and I've done that. I've lived where my whole house was heated by nothing but wood. I understand what it takes, and it was a big house and had terrible insulation. So I understand what it takes. So consider this. What do you really need to do? Is it about keeping your house warm? Is that what you're worried about, having a warm house? Okay. The goldfish care, the geranium care, and the water in the pipes care. Drain the water out of the pipes, eat the fish, eat the plants. The house doesn't care. What cares? It's you. It's keeping you warm. You've got to have a method where you can actually stay warm reliably 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The only way to do that is with clothing. Clothing is the answer. Now, the problem is people say, I've got a lot of winter clothing. People go outside, we play in the winter, we go snowmobiling, we go skiing, we do a little bit of things out there, we take some pictures, we come back in. Nobody ever stays out there long. Now, every now and then somebody goes out for 2 or 3 days in a snow camp. I'm talking about all season, all year. How many people have lived for more than 3 weeks at a time in temperatures below zero? Let me see your hands. Okay, I've lived outside, no fire, no shelter, below zero for 3 weeks and beyond. So now, you don't have to do that. I'm talking about at your home, and let's say that, there's an earthquake can take out the windows and doors, that'd be a problem, but let's just say that for whatever reason, utilities are off, and there's some very good reasons why that could occur in the winter, and more than likely will eventually occur for some period of time. Another lecture for another time. You don't have power, you don't have fuel, you don't have heat, but you have a house. Great. That's a nice tent. I'm not going to go out and try and live in a tent. I'm going to live in my insulated tent that has windows and doors, but it's going to be cold. In this valley down here, the coldest that your house will probably ever get, under the most extreme where you have an inversion in here and it gets really, really cold and there's no sunlight to help warm things up, the coldest your house is likely to ever get is going to be 15 degrees. That's not very cold, by the way. That's easy to deal with. Most of the time it's going to be in the 20s and 30s. Chilly, but not all that cold. Now then, could you live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a place where the temperatures are slightly below freezing. Most people don't have a clue. So what I'm talking about here is a method where you can wear clothing that doesn't pick up moisture. It allows the moisture to pass through it. You can wear it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You sleep in it and those things. Again, I'm talking from experience because I don't think anybody has the right to teach something they haven't actually done. That's what you're able to do. And that's where foam clothing comes in. It's some of this weird looking stuff. Now that I've taught thousands of people around, so some people have seen this stuff before. This is a top. There's a bottom that goes with it. That is underwear, is what that is. Just think of it as underwear. And it would go underneath your loose clothing. I like my clothing loose enough, like my jeans. The bottom will just go on underneath my jeans. I have another shirt that's big. It would go underneath that. And now then with something on my head, my hands and my feet, I can live in an environment that's where you don't have a lot of wind and those kinds of things. I can live in an environment where it's above zero and I can sit around still sedentary and be comfortable. Again, been there, done that. Now, here's one of the challenges you'll run into, and I want to. This is why I talk about this foundation area, and it's about principles. There's reasons why this works better than anything else you've done, and I know there's people here that have done things in the winter and they go out, and I know that you're being taught layering is the answer. Layering is taught like it is a religion. Now, layers work very well, by the way, if you take them within the bounds that they will do. But what I want to tell you about layering, and I don't care what the material is, and I'll go into the physics, and when we have time on this, there's a reason why this occurs. Layers will always, I didn't say sometimes, I said always, layers will always, over time, collect moisture in between the layers. I don't care what the material is. And you say, but we're told that layering is the only thing to do. It has its place, but in the extremes it breaks down because it will collect moisture. How can I prove that to you? Well, when I do the full classes and I have the slides and everything here, you just take a look at a picture of some Arctic animals. Arctic fox, musk oxen, polar bear, ptarmigan, the Arctic fox, you look at them. They live in that environment of the extremes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at times when it's below zero, well below zero all the time, and you have to understand they don't have any layers on. I go back to that master engineer when we're talking about burying stuff in the soil. He knew what the heck he was doing. Because if those animals wore layers, they would all die from ice buildup in between the layers. Most people don't understand that. They don't get that. There's a reason why that occurs. So when you look at those animals, you say, well, what is their insulation like? Well, I have a picture of an Arctic fox, beautiful white animal on there, and you look at him, he has thick, very thick insulation. It is homogeneous, it's monolithic, and it's non-waterproof. There's the rule. It's thick enough, it's homogeneous, monolithic, and no waterproofing. We should learn to do the same thing. Now, we're simulating that very closely with what we do in the foam clothing. Now, by the way, I have a picture of an Arctic fox in the summer. It's hilarious. It looks like Wile E. Coyote. It's this scrawny little thing. You see him with his winter coat on, and he's this puffed up ball on that. So I want to tell you, even though this goes against the norm, that layers, when you're in the extremes, and extreme isn't necessarily cold, extreme is time. 20 degrees above zero, where you don't have fire in shelter, and you're out in it 24 hours a day, that's extreme. That's just as extreme as 20 or 30 below zero with the wind blowing, and you're out in it. The only thing that will do that reliably, that I know will do that, is using the foam clothing. So that's what I talk about and teach people. I didn't say throw away your layers, because layers have their place and you can use them. You just have to know when to shift away from using them, because they'll get you into trouble. So when I talk about foam clothing, this being a top and the bottom that goes with it, I said this is a 2-year supply of your fuel for your house. Well, you're not going to heat the house, you're just going to stay warm. And it weighs, I don't know, 3-4 pounds for the top and bottom set, and you just wear that. You can wear that 24 hours a day. When it's time to go to bed, you don't take it off, you just go to bed. You may change the outer shell that's on it and then just lay down in your regular bedding, because now you don't have to add on mega quilt because you're wearing part of your insulation. Now, if you're going to live outside, I have them back at the booth there. There's some things that are 1 inch thick. This is 1/2 inch, which is for above zero in the semi-sheltered conditions, and then you can go into the extremes. Now, you can learn to make everything that you want. Now, what I do is I take people through a series of classes. We teach them how to make it, how to use it, and those things. And then if they want, we go out on what's called snow college, but it's spelled S-N-O college. And you go out and you live in the colds. Anybody in this audience here ever been to snow college? Okay, I know one up here, so I could ask that question. Anyway, so yes, we do take other people out and enjoy those extremes out there. And there's a video online on our website, Safe Harbor, and it's on one of these things. There's actually a little thing on the back right here that shows you, where's my flyer here? Can you survive winter on the back? There's some videos that you can get to. You can watch one. And one of them is the blizzard interview with 6 snow college participants. And that year we got really, really lucky. Now here's where we like to go. This is a great place to go. How many people know where Logan Canyon is? Going over to Bear Lake, you've probably been up there out of Logan up the canyon. Right on the top up there, you park there. There's a parking area and then you walk on the ridge off to the, what would be to the right as you're going over that way. Up there in that exposed area, it's a wonderful place to be because the wind blows most of the time. And I'm going to take people into the extremes because if you can do it in the extreme, then when it's not extreme, it's easy. But there's an interview up there. We had 6 of these people up there. We got really lucky because we got jumped by the mother of all blizzards. 70, 80, 90 mile an hour winds, blowing snow, whiteout, couldn't see anything. The roads are closed, they're rescuing people and what have you. And we're up there having a ball and the rest of the world is suffering and or dying down there. Now, I'm not trying to turn you into a snow camper. That's not my point here. But my point is if you can live in those kinds of extremes, if you have a house that is unheated, you don't have to be uncomfortable at all. You or your children. And the way to do that is using things, this stuff we call foam clothing. Now this is a mitten. How long does this stuff last? This was made in 1972. It's been above the Arctic Circle at least twice. It's been in Arctic conditions hundreds of times. You can learn to make those kind of things. How about footwear? Well, here's 2 different kind of styles. I show you different ways of making them. This is footwear. This is real 40 below 0, 60 below 0 footwear, assuming the rest of your body is okay. And I say that because I've been out in it and done it out there. The hang tags, one of the things you're going to run into is with the hang tags on clothing and equipment, I call them baloney tags because, you know, it's comfort rated for 20 below 0, 50 below 0, boots 100 below 0 thing out there. You know, it's a joke. It's just a race to see who can hang on the lowest number that might convince you should buy this over something else. That's all that it is. It doesn't have anything to do with reality. Because when I talk about being able to be in these temperature ratings, it's sedentary, not moving, and continuously. Okay. Now, when we're talking about, yes, question? Yes. Yes. No, I made these. This is what I teach people to make. You can make those on there. Now then, mittens can look like this. This is the potholder mitten. I call this one the potholder mitten because it's much simpler and easier to make. You see, you make this one for you because it'll take you a lot of time. You make this one for your kids. Why? Because they're going to lose it, right? And it's simple enough you can teach them to make their own. You want warm hands, kid? Make your own mitten. You don't want warm hands? It's okay. Walk around with your hands in your pocket. That's a hassle kind of a thing. You can make hats. This is a hat that has a cover on it like this, but here's the pattern for the hat without a cover on it. Very simple. You can learn to make those things. There are several different construction techniques that you can use, or of course you can buy things. I mean, we manufacture them, but I'll teach you how to make your own. You look at the footwear, and it's like those boots that I had out, they have a sock liner in them that's a nice sock shape and everything. It takes you a lot of time to build that. It's actually more complicated than you think it is because it's built with 1.5 inch thick foam. And after you've spent quite a few hours building that shell, you're kind of like, it's going to take me that long again to make the liner. Well, they can't be that good. So to get people started, oh, and I need to show you one other thing because I want you to understand this is not all that hard. It's tedious to do. You see this boot right here, right? And you look at that and you say, it looks so complicated, all the foot shape and all those things in there. Let me show you what the real shape is on that. This is how that one's made. It's a tube that's straight up and down. You want a foot shape, put a strap on it. Can you do that? It doesn't even have to have straps, as I showed you. It may have laces on it. So it's all doable. But that sock in there's a challenge to make. And this is how we started out making things initially. Here's what the sock looks like. That's the shape. Could you cut a square of foam? And it doesn't even have to have this slit in it. That's a high-tech option. If you're into Facebook and those things, you might want this on there in computers. If you don't do those things, don't bother to put the slit in it. This is simply folded up, and it doesn't have to have the fabric on it. The fabric makes it wear a little bit better. This thing is simply folded like this. And it's easier when I'm doing it on my foot. I just step down inside of it and I wrap this around my foot like that, shove it down in the bag. Done. That's right, and then I just tie this and then just pull down the straps or the laces and it's on my foot ready to go. Now, the sock that comes out is more convenient than this, but you can do this in 5 minutes. And you can teach somebody to do that. So what I want you to understand is these are all things that are very, very doable, and you need to have a way, a strategy of staying warm when you don't have utilities, because that's going to happen sometime. You live long enough, something's going to happen. Now, maybe it's 50 years from now, fine, I'm gone, but maybe it's 2 weeks from now, and it's going to continue through the winter. I don't know. But those things can happen, and there's a reasonable chance for them to occur. Yes?
And I've had my heat off in my home down 40 degrees, and I just try it, and it works. It's
Lori?
to just fall into bed and
Lori has experience. What she was saying is she's had her heat off in her house, and she's had the house down to 40 degrees in the winter, just using the half-inch foam clothing, and has lived that way. Why would you want to do that?
well, just because you're waiting for, what is it?
Really got your endurance for when it happens.
You're getting experience. You're also knowing,
Empowering.
yeah, it teaches you what you can do. It teaches you that you're okay. Because when I talk about this law of provident living, go back to that one for a moment. You know, what was it? Spiritual, attitude, knowledge, stuff, knowledge. Now, what's talked about very often is people say, look at all the knowledge in the library. Look at all the knowledge on the internet. Look at it. There's no knowledge in the library. There's no knowledge on the internet. There's no knowledge in this class that I'm giving you. I can't give you any knowledge. The only thing I share is information. So what is knowledge? Knowledge is information, and what you need is true, correct, credible information. That's what I deliver. And then you turn it into knowledge by gaining experience with it. So it's a simple little formula. K, knowledge, equals information multiplied by experience. And the approach that I take in teaching, and that you should take in your learning, is to understand the principles about how and why things work. I don't have a lot of time to teach principles here, but I'm just telling you layers have a problem because the laws of physics say that moisture is going to collect in between the layers no matter what the material is. You need to understand that principle of why that's the case if you don't believe it. Yes?
This is also homemade.
This is homemade. I made this myself, and this is what I teach in the classes for you to make. Yes? Well, the base, this is an overshoe. It's actually an overboot. The top has been cut off and thrown away because it's useless. This fabric that's sewn on there, this is hand stitched on there with a sewing awl, and then the sock is made to go inside of it, or the fold up one, either one of them. That's right. That's right. And you can get them. See, if it's an over boot, so it'll go over top of a boot, which means it's extra wide and long to begin with, because you kind of have a lot of insulation in there. Let me give you another principle since we're talking about cold weather for just a moment. If you want to stay warm in the cold, in cold conditions, look fat and get over it. You're going to have to, you know, I talk about 1-inch clothing because if I need to insulate myself to be in Arctic kinds of conditions, temperatures below zero, I need to add 1 inch of air around my body from head to foot, at least 1 inch or more. Look fat. Now, if you don't want to look fat, then your choices are move someplace warm or freeze. And if you freeze, please don't come whining to me because I told you what the rule is. Now, the problem is if you're trying to look fat, depending on what the clothing is, some of it doesn't work very well. Now, these things right here are kind of the typical long johns that you see out here. By the way, this is made with what is officially called by the search and rescue people, this is called death cloth. This will kill you. Cotton. Cotton is death cloth. You never try to use it for cold weather insulation. If you have cotton long johns, you use them for rags or diapers. They're good for that, but don't try to insulate yourself with them. Now, synthetics would be better. The polyesters and the polypropylenes, those are going to be better, but they're still layers. And let's talk about layers for a moment. If you want to be comfortable in Arctic types of conditions, Arctic, what is Arctic? Either extended periods of time or very, very cold. And you say, well, I'm not going to the Arctic. Crazy man in the front of the audience, he goes to the Arctic, right? Hey, that's a great place to go camping, by the way, in the winter. Do you know why? It's not crowded, folks. Nobody goes there in the winter. You can have all the places to camp you want out there. But anyway, but we have Arctic conditions in those mountains up there Do those Arctic conditions come into this valley? Yes, they do. They don't last very long. Arctic, it's going to be, you know, the temperatures go below zero end of September, early October, and it doesn't go above zero until sometime in April, May, and then it's back up above zero. That's real Arctic, extended cold. We see it go well below zero down here, but then it bounces back during the day most of the time. But still, you don't have to be in it very long to be hurt and suffer and or get injured or die. So, last little thing here, because I've got to quit here in just a moment, is I need to surround myself for Arctic conditions with 1 inch of trapped, stabilized, dry, non-moving air. This does that better than anything else on planet Earth. That's the reason I use it, and it'll allow it to move moisture. If I was trying to do that, let's just pretend that this is not cotton, but now it's out of polypropylene, because you can buy those, and I wanted to have 1 inch of air equivalent thickness around me. How many pair do I have to have on? 32. Do you own 32 pair? If you had 32 pair and you put them on, could you move? You'd be wearing plywood, is what it feels like. This is very, very, you know, pliable, flexible. I can put on my 1 inch clothing, move around in it all the time, be very, very comfortable, and it will take care of me. Well, I hope that gives you some principles. There's some of them on here. There's an invitation to go to our website, get more information there. The last little thing is this that I want to share with you. Do you have to know everything? First off, you can't. I didn't say don't try, keep learning and doing, but you can't. What you need is you've got to develop community, relationships with people around you. People that know things you don't know, have things you don't have. This is not about sucking off of each other. This is about sharing with each other and working with each other. You need to develop community. And my definition of community, I'll give that to you and then I'm out of here so that you'll understand what I'm talking about very quickly, is, I want to read it so I get it right here because I spent time writing it one time. It's a unified body of individuals bound together through agreed upon common attitudes, character, interests, needs, fellowship, participation, work ethic, and commitments to the positive benefit of all. Now, at times, this community may be spread among a larger society when things are working as they are right now. But in the instance of significant hardships, the final qualifier of an operational community will be limited to those within practical, functional, working proximity of each other. How far can you walk? I'm an engineer, I'll write with one, I'm sorry. But it explains everything well. You need to develop your relationships, and that's a part of what we want to teach people too. That's why these events are so important. Work together, network together, make relationships, make friends, so that you can help each other when the time comes. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'll be down there at the booth. I'll get out of the way.